welcome back. Grumpy Gunsmith again. We're going to do something a little different today. Instead of a gun, we're going to work on some war clubs. Got a customer who bought some pre-shaped ones, and what he wanted me to do was a little decoration on one of them. So he sent me some drawings he had done, and this one here on the bottom is the one we're going to do today. These lines on here are carved into the wood. The dots around the edge here are going to be brass tacks. So what I've got is the lines already drawn on to the piece, and we'll change this camera angle and you can see that. There's the club in the vise. So I've got the lines drawn out, and I've already actually carved the other side and traced everything over to the other side now, so it all matches left, right. And we're going to start carving this, and basically it's pretty simple. I've got a U-shaped veiner here, and we're going to use that and a light mallet and just start cutting the lines. We'll start at one end here and go to the other. See if I can get this zoomed in a little bit so you can see it better as I work. Now wherever the lines meet up, you want to clean them a little bit. Make sure they're equal depth at both ends. And wherever they come out, kind of get to the end of the line here, and I just kind of pop it up. Let me adjust the angle here a little bit so you can see better. So as I get to the end of a line where it intersects with another one, I'm at the proper depth, but you just sort of pop it up and the piece will come right out like you want it to. Another way you can do this decoration on these is actually use a wood burning set. A lot of these war clubs I see are decorated, tomahawk handles are decorated, and quite often what they do is we'll take a rasp or a file and heat this up in fire and then sort of roll it across the wood while it's hot, and it'll burn in the design of the teeth right onto the wood. And if you got a coarse file or a coarse rasp, it makes kind of a neat impression. It's simple to do. The soldiers and Indians could do that sitting around a fire, you know, do it very quickly. All right, let me zoom back a little bit here, and I'll continue on with some of this carving. Now the owner is Native American, and he's Cherokee, or part Cherokee, and the symbols on here are in a numerical sequence of 7s and 4s, which from what I understand is important to their culture. On the bottom side here we got little crosses, which are I don't know if they're religious or not. And crosses are in every culture, whether they have to do with religion or not. So it's hard to say for sure on this culture. I'm going to continue carving this one. But you see, it's pretty simple. There's not much to it. It's just a matter of following the lines you've got, lightly tapping. You don't want it to dig too deep. You quickly get a feel for it. And if you want to practice on a piece of scrap wood, that's generally the best way to do it if you've never tried this before. This tool I'm using is a Swiss made, and it's number 11 1.5, which means it's a number 11 sweep or gouge and 1.5 millimeters. Alright, well, like I was saying, this is Swiss made. You can get these from Woodworker's Supply. Any good carving chisels work fine. I like these Swiss made ones because they retain a good edge. They have an octagonal shaped handle, which means that when you lay them down on the bench, they aren't rolling off somewhere where you can't find them, where they end up on the floor with the tips getting busted. And they hold up a long time. They're not cheap. This one, I believe, is probably around $40 now, $35 to $40. And if you get enough chisels to, say, carve a gun, you need a minimum of at least 7. And one of these days I'll go through the carving set and show you which ones I use most. I probably have about 40 chisels right now that I've collected over the years, and you really don't need 40 of them, but 7 of the major styles I'll show you in another video that make up a good set to start with. Alright, so let me I'm going to continue on with this, and I'll be back with you in just a moment. Alright, I've got the handle all carved now. Took me all about 10 minutes. And I'm going to carve this cross in. What I got is an outside circle, cross, and in this line on the outside here is actually my guideline for putting the tacks in. This will not be carved in. So to cut this, you got to be a little bit careful, because now you're going on a rounded surface, and I want to do the outside circle first, and I'll have to come at that from different directions. And you do want to make sure your chisel is pretty sharp, because you're going with and against the grain at different points around here. So again, just light taps. Now I'm holding the choked up on the handle here, so I'm just basically using the head weight, and the handle is loose in the back of my hand. That way I get a little bit better control over how I'm hitting this. If your hammer comes in a glancing blow, you can actually take a chance of cutting where you don't want to. It can make the chisel pop out or veer off to one side. So good hammer control is pretty important. Another hammer I might use for carving is a true carver's mallet. Looks like this one. This is an antique one here, and it gives you real good control. You can choke up on it and just use it lightly the same way. And with a rounded surface, you're going to hit a little bit more center each time, especially with a little bit of practice. You can hold it further down the handle and get good whacks with it if you need to for heavy carving. So it's a real handy little piece, and decorative too, and just stand it up on its end over in the corner. And let me get back to what I'm doing here. And when I finish this, what I'm going to do is actually darken the lines with some India ink, and then do a sort of a light golden stain on this. It's got some good figure in the wood. It's maple. Got a lot of curl, and I want the lines to show up nicely. So that's why I will darken them with the ink before I do the staining, and then I'll hand rub oil finish into it. I use my stock finish, and that'll seal the wood nicely. Now on the cross here, I'm not going to do lines across the intersection, so I'm going to start here in the center. And you're trying to keep the cut an even depth, so you kind of have to work your chisel over. So if you're not a contortionist at times, it might get a little tricky getting into some areas. So you may have to move your work around in the vise. I'm going to flip this around so I can get the other side a little better. You see I'm using my support block under here to make sure that if the piece does slip, it doesn't go down and hit the rails underneath and put big dents in the wood. I use that with my gun stocks as well. And I've got a piece of leather in here because the corner of the vise will dig into the wood on this shape if you're not careful. Now in these intersections, I want to clean them up, so I'll go in and come back, cutting into the intersection, which deepens them right up into the corner to the same depth. Like that. Clean those corners up. Clean up my line a little bit. You see where it seems a little narrower than other areas, so I go back and recut it a little deeper, which widens it out. Alright, that looks pretty good. Alright, the next step is I'm going to go sand all my pencil lines off of this. I'm going to leave my guideline for the tacks in there, but I'm going to sand off all the other marks I don't need. You can also erase them, but sanding is good because it also helps to give it a smooth finish again. The more you sand, the smoother it's going to get overall. And I have, after the initial sanding, I've gone ahead and whiskered the wood a few times, which means you wet it with water, let it dry, and that raises the grain. And then you sand it again with progressively finer grit paper till you get down to about 220. And if you do that about 3 or 4 times, wet it and whisker it like that, you get a nice smooth finish. And then if you stain it with a water-based stain, it won't raise the grain and make it all fuzzy again. So it gives you a nice clean finish. And see, I forgot to carve these lines. I'll lay those out again and do it. I got a little guide here that's about 1/4 inch, which is how wide I wanted those cuts made. Got to go across this. Come here and block your view for a second. Take a little brush, clean out the carving, get the sanding out of it. Now, I told you earlier that I've got the other side carved, which you can see here, and what I did was I went ahead and continued the lines across the top of these. Simply by using the 3-corner file, I'll just kind of connect the edges of the cuts on the sides. Just kind of joins everything together. Now what I want to do is show you how to put the India ink on these, and I cheat a little bit with that. If you go down to an art supply store or Staples, you can get these artist pens like this one. And they come in 4 different widths of tips, and these actually are made for drawing, and they are India ink. So instead of using a brush and having a chance of getting it everywhere and having to sand it all off again, these tips are nice size and they work very well. So you can see this one's a little heavy. I'm going to get a finer tip. That's the medium. I'm going to get the fine. You can get in there and you can see how that just fills that line up nicely. and all you do is just draw it along. Sort of color in the lines. I want to make sure you fill the whole bottom and don't leave any light spots. So you can see how that looks pretty good. So we'll do that over the whole thing. Just color in. And this will give you a chance to see where you might or might not have finished the lines up nicely too. So you can go back and clean them up. And zoom in a little bit. Now, the nice thing about India ink, and they used it for a lot of decorations on wood products like this, is that when India ink is dry, it's waterproof, but when it's still in its damp or wet form, you can actually wipe it off with some water. Kind of moving the tip around side to side just slightly. Make sure I get all the edges of that cut. And you may get a little, I notice I'm getting a little sawdust on here, which is stopping the ink from flowing well, so you have to kind of wipe that off. But you get the idea. So what I will do is I'll continue on with this, and when I get ready for the staining, I'll show you how I'm going to do that. And then setting the tacks, you can see this one I've already made marks for where I want the tacks, and I'll have to do that on the other side, lay them out. And before I put the tacks in, I'll do a final sanding, I'll do the staining, and the tacks will be the last thing to go in after it's all finished. It's stained. Here you can see the tack holes. I've just punched them with an awl to get a set, and I'll still have to do this side, of course. But let me finish inking this in, and then I'll get back to you and we'll continue on with the next step. Okay, we got it's pretty well finished up. I got all the carving done, filled in all the lines with the India ink, got the marks for the tacks, so I know exactly where they're going to be. Did a little final sanding, and now we're ready to stain. And what I'm going to use is some of the Laurel Mountain Honey Maple, It'll give it a nice golden color. And use a piece of sheep's wool to apply it. You can see how that's going to bring out that nice figure in the maple. The nice thing about this stain is that you can put it on. It says leave it about 4 hours to dry, and even if you don't get it even, as long as you get it everywhere, it's all going to dry up the same color. And you can see how that's going to really make that carving pop out nicely once it's finished. It doesn't take long to carve something like this, but whatever you do, you want it to be seen at a distance, and that's going to look pretty cool. Yeah, it's going to be real pretty. This will also give you a chance to see where you might have missed some of the sanding, and you can go back and sand certain spots, clean it up, and then just reapply finish again, or the stain I mean, and it'll all blend in nicely. Alright, so we're going to let that sit for a few hours, and then we'll start applying the finish. If you want to, you can go over it and do a little more light sanding or steel wool it just to smooth things up. I can see in this area here, could have cleaned it up a little bit more. Just depends on how far you want to take it. It is a war club after all. It's supposed to be used to beat people with, not impress them with how pretty it is. Alright, so we'll let this sit for a while. I may clean up a little bit here on the handle and restain it, but next time you see it, it'll be ready to put the finish on. And I'll just use some of my stock finish, which is a linseed oil base, and it'll take about 3 coats, possibly 4 with the end grain as much as we have on the balls at the ends. So we'll catch you in a few minutes and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, we got the finish on this now. Got 4 coats of the stock finish on it. Came out pretty nice. Got a nice figure showing through it. Carving showed up real nice, and got tacks in there, which the customer wished. And when putting in tacks like these, you want to drill a pilot hole about 1/8 of an inch deep, undersized for the shank, and then drive it in. That just helps get it started and get it started straight. Especially with these bigger heads like this, you don't want it the head to bend over. And I used a leather mallet to drive those in so I wouldn't get dents on the surface of them as well. So anyways, that's it. Looking pretty good. I think the customer will be very happy with it. And he also had me do another one here. This is just a plain one. So I just stained it and finished it the same way, 4 coats of the finish. So until next time, this is the Grumpy Gunsmith. And I hope you have a good day and try and stay safe out there in this COVID mess that's going on right now. I've been pretty much living in the basement which is kind of handy. It gets things done quicker. I don't have to worry with anybody coming to bother me right now, so I'm getting a little bit more done. So take care, and I will see you next time.